There were two empty chairs at the round table, closest to the dance floor, and they were both Cora's. The brass at the door handle was cool under her fingers. Her shoulder eased. Her pulse softened. The first one belonged to the man who had been her fiancé until November. The second one had been added on principle by a kind sister who had refused to let the seating chart hold the truth in writing for everyone to see. Cora had stopped flinching at the empty chair on her left around the third toast. The one on her right she had been carrying for 6 months in every room she walked into. And tonight, in a ballroom at the Donovan Lansing Hotel on Newbury Street, with her sister married 20 minutes ago and the lights warming into the pale gold the band had been waiting for, the empty chair finally felt almost like furniture. Almost. She pressed her thumbnail into the pad of her opposite forefinger, the small private habit that her mother used to say made her hands look like she was counting beads, and decided that this was, in fact, manageable. Her eyes did not move from the small, dark pattern on the rug. The band on the low stage finished a polite, slow number she did not know. They paused, the way bands do when they are about to step into the part of the night the guests have been waiting for. The lead singer leaned to the pianist. The pianist nodded once, and Cora felt her shoulders go very still, because she recognized the small movement of a piano lid being adjusted half an inch, and a man placing his hands above the keys as though he were the kind of musician who began something gently. The kettle's quiet roar in the next room rose and softened. The first chord landed, and her father's hands were inside it. It was a Bartók lullaby, a small one, played at every wedding she remembered from her childhood because her father, who had been a high school music teacher in a town 2 hours north, had insisted that any wedding worth attending opened its slow set with something a child could fall asleep to. Tessa had been 3 years old when their father first taught her to sit on his knee for this lullaby and pretend to be asleep on the last note. Cora had been 6. She had not heard the piece in 8 years. She had not been able to listen to it after the funeral, and Tessa had stopped asking. And here her sister was, married 20 minutes, standing now at the edge of the parquet with her new husband Daniel and her wedding planner and a glass of something very pale, looking across the room at Cora with a face that said, "I am sorry. I asked them not to. They did it anyway. I love you. I love you." Cora made a small motion with her hand that meant, "It is fine. Dance, dance." Tessa did not believe her. But Daniel, kind, slow, architect Daniel, who had spent the better part of 2 years being patient with everyone in Cora's family, in the way only a man who genuinely meant his wedding vows could be patient, touched the small of Tessa's back and steered her onto the floor. Tessa went with him, but she went looking back, and Cora pressed her thumbnail harder. She felt her breath settle, low and steady. A faint, sweet smell of paper and silk. The second slow song began. Cora did not move. She had not realized, until the lullaby ended and the band slid into something older and a little plainer, that her shoulders had been climbing toward her ears. She lowered them. She picked up her glass and did not drink. She watched a couple in their 60s step onto the floor and remember each other. She watched a great aunt who had no business dancing dance anyway. She watched her mother, Margaret, school librarian, sensible shoes even at a wedding, talking near the bar to an older man Cora did not know. The kind of talking her mother only did when she had decided to be cheerful as a form of public service. The light moved softly across the wood. And then, from somewhere on the periphery of all that, a man crossed the floor toward her without seeming to be in a hurry about it. The leather strap of the satchel creaked as she set it down. He was tall, but he did not carry the height the way some tall men do, like a thing they had paid for. He wore a dark suit that had been cut for him and not for a magazine. His shoes were good. The pocket square was white. He did not look at her until he was already inside the perimeter of her table, and then he stopped a polite distance from her chair and rested his palm flat on the back of the chair her ex-fiancée would not be sitting in, his fingers curving over the wood, as though he were testing whether it was steady. I have been watching you sit out 2 songs, he said. His voice was low and unhurried. There was no flirtation in it, which surprised her. There was something else. A small, careful seriousness. The seriousness of a person who has done a job for a long time and learned that the best way to start a conversation that mattered was to say what you had actually observed. The room held the bright morning quiet of a Sunday. It was a busy afternoon, Cora said. She did not know why she had answered him in that voice, clipped, professional, the voice she used when a publisher called wanting an estimate. Would you dance the next one with me? She had a faint, dry impulse to laugh, the way a person who has stopped expecting things laughs when they are tested. Instead, she said, no. He absorbed that. He did not flinch and he did not press. He glanced at the empty chair under his hand. Is this seat yours as well? It is empty, she said. May I sit in it? She looked up at him properly for the first time. He had the kind of face that did not give anything away on its own, neither closed nor open, neither soft nor sharp. The face of a man who had been required for years to listen carefully to people who were politely upset about a missing reservation or a drafty room. His eyes were grey, or grey-green. She would not be able to decide later when she tried to remember. There was a small white scar at his hairline, the kind a child gets falling off a bicycle. You can sit, she said. I will not dance. He pulled the chair out one width and sat down at the angle of polite company, not toward her, not away. He did not introduce himself. She did not ask. She liked, in a way she did not let herself examine, that he had asked her once and only once, that he was now content to be there because he had said he would be. She felt her breath settle, low and steady. My sister got married 20 minutes ago, she said, into the silence, and then could not believe she had said it. I noticed, he said. I was at the door. You were not invited? I was not. He turned the wine glass on the table half an inch with one finger, as though the angle had been bothering him. I work in the building. At the hotel, she said. He nodded once. I did not realize the staff stayed for the dancing. A small, private smile she could see only in the corner of his mouth. We do not, as a rule. I was finishing a walkthrough. On a Saturday night? My properties get a Saturday night lookover once a quarter, he said, and stopped, as though he had become aware that he had said properties and not property, and wished he had not. I am sorry I interrupted the lullaby. She kept her face still. You heard the lullaby. I asked the pianist to leave the slow set, as the bride's family had requested it. I did not know which family member had requested what. I am sorry if it was the wrong one. The wrong one. Cora pressed her thumbnail. It was both of us, she said. My sister asked. I would not have. He said nothing. He did not lean toward her. He did not look at her in the way that men sometimes looked at women at weddings who were sitting alone. He turned the wine glass back to its original angle. He listened to the band move into the next song, an old jazz standard the great-aunt was now butchering with great enthusiasm. The light moved softly across the wood. After a while he said, very quietly, I should let you have your table. May I bring you anything from the bar? No, she said. Thank you. He inclined his head a fraction. He stood. He pushed the chair back in carefully. Before he turned away, he looked at her, once, properly, and said, I am glad you sat out. She did not know what to say to that, and so she said the only true thing she could think of, which was, so am I. He walked across the floor and disappeared through a small staff door at the back of the room. The lights changed. The band finished the standard. Tessa came over, hot from the dancing, and put her cool hand against Cora's cheek, and asked nothing. Later, on the long ride home in the back of the wedding car with her mother asleep against her shoulder, Cora realized she had not asked the man his name. and he had not given it. And she also realized that the lullaby, the thing she had been afraid of for 8 years, had passed through her without breaking her, and that for the first time in 6 months she had not, for an entire conversation, been the woman whose fiancé had left in November. She had been a woman sitting at a table. She fell asleep against her mother and did not dream. The next morning she had to go back to the hotel because Tessa had left their grandmother's earring in the bathroom of the family suite, and Tessa was on a plane to Maine by 8, and someone had to retrieve it before the room was turned. She pressed her thumbnail to her fingertip. It was a soft press. The Donovan Lansing's lobby at 10 on a Sunday in May was the kind of quiet that had been engineered. The kind of quiet you could only get from a building staffed by people who had decided, years ago, that there were certain hours when no voice should be raised above the level of a polite question. The marble floor caught the daylight from the high windows. A pianist, not the one from the wedding, was playing something small and unobtrusive on the lobby grand. Cora had been in this lobby twice before in her life. Once for her sister's rehearsal dinner 6 weeks ago, and once last night. And both times it had felt like a place that did not quite know she was there. This morning, with her hair pulled back and a thin spring coat over the dress she had worn for the rehearsal, it felt almost like a kind room. A long-faced man at the concierge desk, silver hair, very straight posture, the dark blazer of someone who had once worn another kind of uniform, looked up at her, took her in, and said, "Miss Whitfield." "You remember me," she said, which was probably the wrong thing to say to a man in his job. "I have a respectable memory for the family of a Saturday night bride. The earring?" "The earring." "Mrs. Park telephoned at 7. Housekeeping has been holding the door. Please come this way." He came out from behind the desk and led her toward the elevators. He moved like a man who had decided, decades ago, that he would never again be in a hurry inside a building. The brass name badge on his lapel said, Henry Carrick. He pressed the call button. She felt her breath settle, low and steady. "There has been some excitement this morning at the back of house," he said, as though offering a small piece of weather. "The freight elevator decided to take itself out of service. I would not normally trouble a guest with this, but if you hear a man swearing genteelly in a stairwell on the way up, please do not assume the hotel is failing." She almost smiled. "Is the man you?" "Not this morning." The elevator arrived. He held the door for her. He turned the key for the 14th floor. He stepped back into the lobby and let her go up alone, and Cora rode in the polite hush of the brass and walnut box and tried to remember what she was doing here, and not why she could still hear, in a part of her ear she had thought safely closed, the first chord of a Bartók lullaby. The 14th floor corridor smelled faintly of fresh-cut hyacinth from the side-table flowers. The housekeeping cart sat by the open door of the family suite, and inside the suite, a woman in a grey uniform was wiping down the bathroom counter with the absent focus of a person whose Sunday had begun 3 hours before sunrise. Cora apologized for interrupting. She crossed to the bathroom. The earring, a small, very old pearl drop that had been Cora and Tessa's grandmother's, the one Tessa had merely cried over the night before, was sitting on the dressing table tray, exactly where Tessa had set it, untouched, because housekeeping had been told not to. She set her fingers, lightly, on the cold rim of the cup. "You have saved a wedding morning," Cora said. "It would not be the first," the woman said, and went on wiping. She could smell, faintly, the warm coffee in the next room. Cora put the earring into the small velvet pouch she had brought for it. She closed her bag. She thanked the woman. She stepped out into the corridor and turned toward the elevators. And that was when, around a turn near the service door, she walked directly into a man carrying a clipboard. He did not drop the clipboard. He did not, in fact, react at all in the way most men in a corridor would react. He simply caught her elbow with his free hand. A careful, balanced contact. The contact of a person who had been catching things in hallways for a long time, and steadied her, and then released her. and stepped back the precise width necessary to make her not feel pinned. A soft creak from the leather chair. "I beg your pardon," he said. It was the man from the wedding. He was not in a suit. He wore a dark sweater and dark trousers, and the kind of clean, unobtrusive watch Cora had seen on the wrists of doctors who did not want to look like the kind of doctor who needed an expensive watch. He did not have a tie. His shoes were the same. His face had the same quality of careful seriousness it had carried last night, which now, in a corridor at 10 in the morning, looked less like courtesy and more like a default mode. "Oh," she said. "Hello." "You are still here." "I came back for an earring." "Was it found?" "It was." "Good," he said gently. He glanced at the clipboard, then up. "You are not... I'm sorry. You are not on my list. Should I be worried?" The clipboard had a list on it of room numbers and small notations beside them. 1408 carpet seam, 1411 second pillow shams, 1416, that was the family suite. Guest returning for personal item, do not disturb until 11. So they had told the staff she was coming. "I do not think you should be worried," she said. "All right." She looked at the clipboard. She looked at the sweater. She looked at his face. She placed him, in the way one places a piece in a jigsaw puzzle that did not, at first, seem to belong to the puzzle one was working on, but did. The velvet on the chair arm was warm where her palm had been. "You work in the building," she said. It came out a little drier than she had meant. "I do." "You said that last night." "I did." "What is it you actually do here?" He hesitated. It was the smallest hesitation, the kind a person can hear only if they are listening for it. And Cora, who had spent 5 years translating Hungarian poets, for whom a pause between two words was the entire meaning of a line, was listening. His palm rested flat on the doorframe to his left, the way it had rested on the chair back the night before. The brass of the door handle was cool under her fingers. Her hand was steady. Her breath was not. "I look after it," he said. She felt, then, the first small click of something assembling itself somewhere in her chest. A click she did not know yet how to read. The hallway was quiet. The hyacinth smelled like the spring it was. Somewhere a door clicked shut. Somewhere a cart squeaked. He was watching her face the way a man watches the face of a person to whom he is preparing to say a true thing. Her fingers were cold. The table was warm. The housekeeper came out of the suite, saw him, gave him the small, respectful nod that staff gave people for whom they had been instructed to give a small, respectful nod, and went on past with her cart. He did not return the nod. He kept his eyes on Cora. "What is your name?" Cora said. "Liam," he said. He hesitated half a beat, the way a person hesitates when their full name carries information they have decided, in the second before they speak it, not to volunteer in a corridor. He set the clipboard down on a small console table against the wall, as though to remove an object from between them. "I am sorry I let you guess the rest at the wedding. I told the pianist to play the lullaby because Mr. Park asked me to honor the bride's family's request. I should have stayed at the door." "You did stay at the door. You said so." "Until I saw you sit out 2 songs. After that, I did not." The corridor was very quiet. "Why?" she said, which was the only question that mattered. "Because," he said after a careful pause, "you sat at a table for a person who was not coming. And I thought, it sounds ridiculous, in a sweater, in a corridor. I thought that the thing you needed was a person who had also walked across that floor, for no reason other than the floor. Not someone who worked there. Just someone." She did not say anything. "Once I had said I work in the building," he said. "The rest was about to become a conversation between you and a person whose job it was to be there. I did not want that. I wanted..." He took his palm off the doorframe. He flattened it briefly, awkwardly, against his thigh, as though uncertain what to do with it once he had not been resting it on something. I wanted, for a song's length, to be a man who had walked across a floor. The hyacinth, the hush, the Bartok lullaby still on her father's keys 8 years behind her, played by a stranger she had not asked to play it. The room held its warm, careful hush. "I have to go," Cora said. "I know." "Thank you for the earring being where it was." "I did not do that. Henry knew it was there. I sign whatever Henry tells me to sign." She almost laughed. It came out of her in a small, surprised breath through her nose. The small explanation read, in that moment, the way the small explanations of senior staff read in a well-run hotel. A man who had been in the building for years and was trusted enough to be carrying a clipboard through the corridors on a Sunday morning, on first-name terms with the concierge, with a sweater and no tie. A property manager, perhaps. A night manager, perhaps. The kind of man who oversaw the small things one did not see in a place like this. She did not, then, look at the clipboard again. She did not, then, ask what I look after it had meant. She had a flight on a sister to catch up to in her own head, and she did not have spare hands for a man's job description. She set her shoulders. She walked past him down the corridor. He did not follow her. He did not call after her. She heard, very faintly, his palms settle against the doorframe again, as though he had decided to keep the corridor stable until she was out of it. Her pulse was a small, bright thing at her throat. In the elevator going down, she pressed her thumbnail into her finger so hard she left a small purple half-moon, and she did not know whether what she was feeling was the embarrassment of having been seen at her own sister's wedding by a man whose name she still did not entirely have, or something closer to the feeling of finding out, at the end of a long musical phrase one had been listening to with one's eyes closed, that the piece had been written for one's voice. She pressed her thumb softly to the leather of the cover. Henry held the door for her as she crossed the lobby. He said nothing about it. He inclined his head exactly half an inch, as he had inclined it when she had come in, and she went out into the bright Newbury Street morning and walked 4 blocks before she remembered which direction her flat was in. 2 weeks went by, and she did not, in those 2 weeks, walk down Newbury Street. She translated. She delivered a draft of a short Hungarian novel to its US editor. She and Amelia Ose, her business partner of 3 years, who had once been the editor at a small literary magazine that had run Cora's first piece on Adam Kalmar, sat in the front room of their second-floor studio on Charles Street and went over their summer schedule with the kind of patience 2 people who had been working in the same room for 3 years could afford each other. A small dust of sun lay on the table. "The case for taking the Kalmar collection," Amelia said, in the long, asides-embedded sentences she used when she was thinking aloud, "is that he has, at long last, decided, after 15 years of mild contempt for the English-speaking world, that he will let his next book come out in English first. Which is, on the face of it, flattering, and on the underface of it, terrifying. Because we will not, in this office, be allowed to fail at it. The case against it is that the book is 260 pages long, and we have promised the Romanian editor a finished draft of the Bulgarian poems by the end of August. And you, Cora, are not actually 2 people, which is a thing I sometimes have to remind you of." "I am one person," Cora said. "The case for one person doing both," Amelia said, "is that the one person in question is the only translator in North America Adam trusts." She turned the page on her legal pad. "By which I mean, he likes you specifically. He likes you also. He likes me sufficiently. He likes you specifically. You may notice the difference." The studio's small bell rang. Their door was the kind of door that did not get rung without prior arrangement. The studio was on the second floor of a row house, above a small dressmaker's shop, and most of their clients came to them by post or by email, Amelia made a face. She went to the buzzer. Cora kept her place in the manuscript and was unprepared 2 minutes later when the door at the top of the stairs opened and Amelia came back into the front room, and behind her was a tall man in a dark sweater with a flat brown paper-wrapped package under his arm. Cora stood up. "He said he had a delivery," Amelia said, in a register Cora had never heard her use before, which sounded like the register of a person who was about to ask a great many polite questions later and was, for now, withholding all of them. "He said he was prepared to leave it downstairs if it was inconvenient." "Hello," Liam Donovan said to Cora. "Hello," Cora said. He had the package under his arm, the way a man would carry something he did not entirely know how to give. He looked at Amelia and then back at Cora, and Cora, who was not, in fact, going to invent a man for Amelia, said, "Amelia, this is Liam. We met at my sister's wedding." "At the wedding," Amelia said. "He works at the hotel," Cora said. "At the hotel," Amelia said. She looked Liam slowly up and down with the inventory eye of a woman who had once worked at a literary magazine and knew intimately what sort of trouble showed up at second-floor studios with parcels. "The case for me making tea," she said, "is that we have no other choice." She went into the back room. Liam set the package on the long table where Cora and Amelia laid out manuscripts. He did not unwrap it. He stood at the table opposite Cora, with his palm resting flat on its surface, the way it had rested on the chair back and the door frame, and waited. His hand rested, flat, on the smooth wood. "You did not have to," Cora said. "I know. I have not been by the hotel. I noticed. You did not need to come here." "I am here," he said, "because I read the Kalmar piece you published in the Massachusetts Review in March, and I want to give you this in person rather than send it. It is for you to keep or to refuse." "What is it?" "Open it." She opened it. Under the brown paper was a thin, much-handled paperback book, the kind of edition that had not been printed since the late 1980s. The cover was faded sage green. The title was in Hungarian. It was the first collection Adam Kalmar had ever published, in 1988, when he was 23. There were 400 copies in the original print run. Cora had seen one once, on a glass shelf at a poetry library in Budapest, and the librarian had not let her hold it. Her eyes did not move from the small, dark pattern on the rug. "How did you get this?" Cora said. "A friend of a man who runs a Hungarian bookshop in Queens. He was very specific about the trade. I'm not going to tell you what it cost me. He told me you would know. He would have known I would know. He said, 'Tell her not to translate from this edition because it has typos.' I have not, of course, the faintest idea what he meant. I asked him to write the line down so I would not get it wrong." He took a folded square of paper out of his pocket and put it on the table next to the book. The handwriting was small, careful, foreign. The line was exactly as he had quoted it. The fire in the small grate had burned to a soft, dark glow. Cora set her hand on the book. She did not pick it up. She felt the small, foolish, dangerous warmth that arrived in a person when somebody who had paid attention to her work in private was suddenly standing in her own room. She pressed her thumbnail into her finger. A sharp, bright square of sun moved across the rug. "Why are you giving me a book?" she said. "Because," he said slowly, "I asked the pianist to play a Bartok lullaby for a bride's family at a wedding that I had not been invited to, and a woman I had never seen before sat out 2 songs at a round table near the dance floor, and I wanted, then, to know what the music had done to her. I did not, of course, know yet, and I did not ask. Later I looked up a name. The name had published, in the Massachusetts Review, an essay on a Hungarian poet I had not heard of. The essay said, in the 3rd paragraph, that the poet wrote about weather as though weather were a verb. I've spent 4 weeks thinking about that sentence. He paused. He looked at the book. I am not very good at this, he said. I do not, as a rule, do anything in my life that does not have a brass plate beside it. I bought you a book. The kettle in the back room clicked off. Amelia, who could be heard in the next room moving cups very deliberately, was giving them more time than the kettle had actually taken. The room held its warm, careful hush. Her fingers were cold. The table was warm. You bought me a book, Cora said. Yes. She picked it up. She opened it to the first poem. It was the one she had first translated, the one that had made her decide, at 23, that she would do this for a living. She read the first line in Hungarian, in the small voice she used when she was reading to herself. The kettle's quiet roar in the next room rose and softened. Thank you, she said. You are welcome. She closed the book. She set it on the table. She set her hand on top of it. I am not very good at this either, she said. I noticed, he said, gently. And that was the closest he had come in 20 minutes to making her smile. And she did not then, but she felt the smile assemble itself somewhere in her chest, the way one feels a piece of music waiting in the air before the band begins. A sharp note from the street, then quiet again. Amelia came back in with 3 cups of tea on a tray, as though the whole thing had been planned a week in advance. The room held the bright morning quiet of a Sunday. He stayed for half a cup, no more. He answered Amelia's questions about the studio's lease, and the size of the front room, and the dressmaker downstairs, with the easy honesty of a person who had been answering questions in front rooms for years. He did not, Cora noticed, mention his work. He said he had grown up in Boston. He said he had spent a year in Vienna in his 20s. He said the package had taken 3 phone calls and a Sunday morning trip to Queens. When he stood to leave, he did not, by any small movement of his hand, give Cora the impression that he was waiting for her to invite him back. He thanked Amelia for the tea. He turned to Cora. If I write to you, will you read it? Cora pressed her thumbnail to her fingertip. Yes. He went out through the door at the top of the stairs. They listened to him go down. They heard, faintly, the small bell at the bottom of the stairwell as he opened the street door, the way someone closing a hotel-trained door closes it, with the heel of one hand against the frame so the latch will not clatter. Amelia waited approximately 10 seconds. All right, she said. We are going to drink this tea, and you are going to tell me what a man with a hotel-trained door-closing technique is doing, carrying a 1988 first edition into our front room. I do not know what a hotel-trained door-closing technique is. It is the thing a person learns to do when they are paid not to wake guests. I went to school with 3 boys who had it. Tell me about him. So Cora told her. She told her about the wedding, the 2 empty chairs and the Bartok lullaby, and the man crossing the floor. She told her about the next morning, and the earring, and the corridor, and the clipboard. She told her about not having heard from him for 2 weeks, and about not having walked down Newbury Street in the same 2 weeks. She did not, because she did not entirely know what to make of it herself, tell Amelia what he had said about the Massachusetts Review piece, or the line about weather as a verb. She kept that. Outside, a soft wind moved in the linden trees. Amelia drank her tea. Amelia listened, in the way she listened when she was reading, with her whole attention, no interruptions, the very small motion of her lips she made when she was about to disagree with a sentence in a manuscript. Smoke from a far chimney threaded the bright sky. The case against you, Amelia said at the end, is that you are 6 months and 4 days out from a man who left you on a Tuesday by email, and you are exactly the kind of person who arrives at the wrong door very neatly 6 months and 4 days later because you have been counting. The case for you is that you have not been counting since approximately the slow set of your sister's wedding, and the man who brought you a book in our front room has the kind of careful face that suggests he is also keeping a tally somewhere about himself. I do not, therefore, have a verdict. I have a question. What is the question? Did you press your thumbnail into your finger when he asked if you would read his letter? Cora looked at her hand. The half-moon from the Sunday morning elevator was long gone, but a new, lighter print sat there, in the same place. She put her hand around her teacup. You did, Amelia said. You did. I am, you understand, professionally invested. You are not professionally invested. The case for me being professionally invested is that I have, for 3 years, been the editor-in-chief of a literary magazine called Cora Whitfield, and I would like the next issue to be readable. Cora laughed. It was the first laugh that had moved her shoulders properly in 6 months and 4 days, and she felt it loosen something in her chest that she had not realized was tight. Amelia did not look at her when she laughed. Amelia, who was a careful editor, knew when not to look at the page she had just fixed. Somewhere down the hall the elevator hummed and stopped. He wrote, 2 days later, by post. It was a short letter, on plain, heavy paper, with no letterhead. Cora. Henry has discovered, in the back office, a recording of the Bartók Lullaby, played by a man who taught at the New England Conservatory in 1973, on a tape that has not been played in 12 years. He thinks the cassette will not survive a second hearing. If you would like to be the second hearing, please come on Saturday at 3 to the lobby and ask for him. He has agreed to play it on the office machine. He will keep the recording afterwards, but he says he will let you have it if you ask. L. The handwriting was square and patient, and did not, at any point, slope. There was no address on the envelope but her own. It had been delivered by hand. She went on Saturday at 3. Henry was at the concierge desk. He inclined his head exactly half an inch when he saw her, as he had inclined it on the Sunday morning, and led her down a short corridor behind the back of the lobby to a small office with 2 chairs and a wooden desk, and a small, much-loved, portable cassette player on the desk. He did not, anywhere on the walk, mention the name of the man who had asked him to do this. He put the cassette into the machine. He pressed play. He stepped back to the door and waited at the threshold, the way a senior steward waited at the threshold of a dining room while a passenger ate a private meal. She set her fingers, lightly, on the cold rim of the cup. The pianist on the tape was a Hungarian. She could hear it in the 3rd bar, in the way he leaned on the secondary stresses the way her father had leaned on them. And the lullaby was the same Bartók, and not the same. It was slower. It was less polished. It was, in some small private way she could not have said aloud, the way her father would have played the piece in his 60s. If her father had been alive to be in his 60s. She kept her hands in her lap. She did not press her thumbnail. She listened. The cassette hissed. The piece ended. The cassette went on hissing, in the way old tapes did, for a long moment, until the click at the end of the take. The bright copper of the kettle caught the light. "Mr. Carrick," she said, when she could speak. "Miss Whitfield?" "Is Liam here today?" "He is upstairs. He asked me not to be in this room while you listen. He said the room was small enough as it was." She nodded. She watched her hands in her lap. "Thank you for finding it." "It was not difficult. It was in a box of tapes my predecessor had labeled, 'Do not throw out.' That is the sort of label one trusts." "May I leave him a note?" "I think he would prefer that you did." She tore a leaf from the small notebook in her bag. She wrote in pencil, "Liam, thank you. I will come back. See." She handed it folded to Henry. He did not, of course, read it. He put it on the corner of the desk. He saw her out across the lobby. He let her pass into the bright afternoon without offering her a glance she did not want, and she did not, even then, look up at the brass plate on the marble pillar inside the door, because she had decided somewhere between the second bar of the lullaby and the click at the end of the take, that the building was not the point. He took her the next Friday to dinner at a small Italian restaurant a long block from the river, the kind of restaurant whose owner answered the telephone himself. She wore a dress she had made over from a dress she had worn 8 years ago to her cousin's college graduation, because she did not have in her closet anything she had bought new since November. And she had decided the previous Sunday that she was not, in fact, going to buy a new dress for a Friday dinner with a man who had so far given her a 1988 first edition and a cassette of a piano teacher's lullaby. She wore her hair down. She wore the pearl earring, the one that had not gone home with Tessa, because Tessa had given it to her on the plane to Maine, the way Tessa had been giving Cora small things for 6 months without making a speech about it. The leather of the chair gave a single, quiet creak. Liam met her on the pavement at 7:45. He had on a different sweater, dark blue this time, and a coat. He did not, when he greeted her, kiss her cheek. He did not, when he opened the door for her, take her elbow. He did not, when the host showed them to a corner table, settle her chair in the proprietary way some men settled chairs. He waited until she had sat down, and then he sat down opposite her. And then he placed both palms flat on the tablecloth and said, "I have been looking forward to this." She had not, in 8 years, heard a man say, "I have been looking forward to this," to her face, without sounding, in the second half of the sentence, as though he wanted credit for it. The room held its warm, careful hush. "So have I," she said. The waiter came. The owner came, briefly, to shake Liam's hand. The owner's English had a small Sicilian thickness to it. The owner called him Liam, not Signor. And Cora, who was watching the small economies of how a room arranged itself around her dinner partner, the way one watched the small economies of a poem, noticed that the owner did not, with Liam, do the half bow he had done with the elderly couple 2 tables down. The owner treated Liam as a regular, not as a kind of dignitary. That was, she thought, the more flattering treatment. They ordered. They ate. He asked her about Adam Kalmar. She told him about meeting Adam for the first time in Budapest at 23, the small flat on Lonyai Utca, the way Adam had refused, for the first hour, to speak to her in English, the way at the second hour he had passed her a cup of coffee and said, in English, "I will tell you a thing about translation. The poem is the apartment. You are the friend who has been asked to water the plants. Do not move the furniture." She told him that for 3 years she had used that sentence as her rule, and for the 4th and 5th years she had broken it sparingly, because Adam was an unreliable apartment owner who was secretly delighted when a friend rearranged a chair. She could smell, faintly, the warm coffee in the next room. Liam listened. He laughed twice, small, private laughs, the laughs of a person who did not have a great many spare laughs, and so spent them carefully. He did not, at any point in the dinner, look at his watch. He did not, at any point, take his phone out of his pocket. He asked her about her father. The leather of the chair gave a single, quiet creak. She had not, in 6 months, been able to talk about her father with a man. "He taught high school music," she said, "in a small town 2 hours north. He was the kind of music teacher who had a Bartok lullaby in his rotation at every wedding he went to, because he did not believe in opening a slow set with anything a child could not fall asleep to. We lost him on a Saturday in April when I was 19. My sister was 16. We have not, in our family, played the lullaby since." "And the lullaby at the wedding?" "Tessa asked the band the day before. She told me afterwards. She said she had been waiting 8 years to hear it played in the same room as me. She said she did not, frankly, care if I cried. She said she would have given me a handkerchief." He did not, then, say, "I am sorry," which would have been the small, wrong sentence. He set his fork down. He looked at her. He said, "I'm glad she asked the band." "So am I." "What did the lullaby do to you?" She considered her water glass. "It returned my father to me, for the length of 3 minutes and 20 seconds, she said, in a room my sister had filled with people who loved her. It was, on balance, an enormous gift. I did not know it until I had heard it. And the first man across the floor? He was the second gift. I have not yet decided what to do with him." He inhaled once through his nose. "Take your time," he said. "I am not on a schedule." It was the kindest sentence anyone had said to her in 8 months, and she did not, then, have an answer for it. The waiter came and cleared the plates. The owner came back to discuss dessert. Liam, who had clearly been here often enough that the owner knew his preferences without asking, ordered for them both, with her permission, the small lemon thing the owner's wife made on Fridays. They ate it. They drank a small glass of something at the owner's insistence. He walked her, in a thin spring rain that had started while they were inside, the 8 blocks back to her flat, holding an umbrella whose handle he had wrapped, at some point in the past, with a strip of dark leather where the handle had gone bare. He did not, at her door, suggest coming up. He did not, at her door, suggest seeing her tomorrow. He said, with his palm flat on the brick beside her door, "I would like to see you again. May I write?" "Yes," she said. He inclined his head, the same half-inch nod that, she now realized, he had learned from Henry, and walked back out into the rain. Her breath, a small, quiet thing. In the small lobby of her building, with the wet umbrella shaking water onto the tiles, she stood for a long moment with her hand on the banister. She thought about the way the owner of the restaurant had called him Liam. She thought about the easy way he had ordered. She thought, briefly, for the first time in 2 weeks, that she had not asked him what his work was. She had not, in 3 meetings, asked him, "What I look after," it had meant. She had decided, without entirely realizing she had decided, that the building was not the point. 3 weeks went by, in the rhythm of a city that did not, in May, hold still. Tessa came back from her Maine honeymoon. Margaret Whitfield, Cora's mother, came down from the town 2 hours north for a Wednesday lunch. Over a second cup of weak coffee at the kitchen table, Margaret said to Cora, very mildly, "If you are going to make me wait until Christmas to be introduced to him, I will survive it." Cora, who had not, in fact, told her mother about Liam, set her fork down. "How did you know?" she said. "Your sister cannot keep a secret for 48 hours, and she found out from Amelia, who told her at the wedding the week after. He brought a book to the studio, that is all. Your father brought me a music score the second week we met, and that was also, at the time, all." Cora laughed. Margaret, who did not, as a rule, laugh, nodded once. She finished her coffee and went back to the school library and the town 2 hours north, and Cora translated Kalmar in her studio with the window open onto Charles Street. A sharp note from the street, then quiet again. He wrote, twice a week, by post. He never wrote long letters. He wrote sentences. Henry says the air conditioning on the 11th floor is, as predicted, taking the summer personally. I have, in the drawer of the desk in my office, a tin of biscuits my mother sent me 3 months ago that I have not had the heart to open. Send me a poet who has written about a tin of biscuits. On Saturday, I will be at the studio at 4 if you will read me the page you said you could not get right. He did not, in any letter, say what his work was. He did not, in any letter, name the hotel. He signed each one L. She wrote back, at first cautiously, on the pale cream paper she used for letters to Adam Kalmar, in a handwriting she had not used since she had stopped writing to her grandmother in Budapest in 2017. She read him, on Saturday at 4, the page she could not get right. A poem of Adam's about a man who lived alone in a town in the foothills of the Matra, and who, every spring, watched the roof of his own kitchen rust. "The spring is rusting," she read in Adam's English, and then in her own first attempt, and then in her second, and Liam, who had sat across from her at the long table with his palm flat on the wood, listening, said very quietly, "The first one. The first one is the truer one. The second one is the one you would have written if you had been worried about the editor." "I was worried about the editor." "I know. I was reading you worry about her." "Her?" "The editor. You do not know who the editor is." "I do not. But you have written she 3 times in the margin in pencil, and you have crossed it out once and put they. The editor is a woman who frightens you, and the line is being made smaller because of her." She looked at him. She turned the page on the manuscript. She rubbed out the crossed-out she. She wrote it back in. She left it. The silk of her sleeve brushed the cold edge of the desk. "You read upside down very well," she said. "I had 18 months of practice as a teenager. I will not, on this occasion, tell you the story." "On a future occasion?" "On a future occasion, yes." She did not, then, ask him what the 18 months had been, or what he had been reading upside down. But she filed the sentence carefully behind her sternum, with the cassette and the book and the umbrella, and she pressed her thumbnail half a turn into her finger. She felt the sharp, soft edge of the page against her thumb. That same Saturday, late after he had gone, she walked, on a small impulse, the 4 blocks from her studio toward the hotel. She did not, when she got to the corner of Newbury, cross the street. She stood on the opposite pavement and looked at the building. The brass plate beside the door read, as it had read every other time she had passed it, Donovan Lansing, a Donovan hospitality property. There was, above the door, an awning that was, even from the opposite pavement, a familiar shade of dark green. She had been inside it twice. She had taken a cup of tea in the lobby cafe once. She had thought, at her own rehearsal dinner 2 months ago, that the dining room above the lobby was the prettiest dining room she had ever stood in. She walked along the pavement to the next corner. She did not, then or that night, look up the names. A small dust of warm sun across the floorboards. 3 days later, a small society blog she had never read in her life, but which Amelia kept open in a browser tab while she invoiced clients, ran a piece under the headline, "Boston hotelier Liam Donovan spotted around Newbury with local literary translator." Amelia, who had clicked through to the gossip column entirely because her client had been an hour late paying, set down her coffee and said, in the voice of a woman who had decided to be a professional about this for as long as she could stand to be, "Cora, come over here." Cora came over. The piece was short. It was the kind of piece that ran when someone with a phone in a restaurant on a Friday night had decided that a man at a corner table was worth a photograph. The photograph was not, in fact, of Liam and Cora. It was a stock photograph of the hotel's awning. The text identified Liam by full name and by title, President, Donovan Hospitality Group, and identified Cora only as a Newbury Street literary translator. It did not name her. It did, however, get the studio's general neighborhood right. Outside, a soft wind moved in the linden trees. The phrase Donovan Hospitality Group sat in Cora's vision in a way the phrase Donovan Lansing on the brass plate by the door had never sat. Group was the new word. Group was a fleet of buildings, not a building. President was the new word. President was not a property manager. She read the piece twice. She felt her thumbnail go into her finger. She closed her eyes. The wood of the desk was smooth under her palm. Amelia, watching her face, said, "Did you not know?" "I did not know." "You did not ask?" "I did not ask. He did not say. He has, for 2 months, signed his letters L. You did not ask what I look after it meant." "I did not ask." "Cora." "I know." "Cora." "I know, Amelia. I know." She put on her coat. She walked the 4 blocks to Newbury. She crossed the street this time. She went up the small marble step. She went through the door, which had been opened for her by a doorman whose face she now remembered from the rehearsal dinner. She crossed the lobby. The pianist was playing something small. Henry Carrick was at the concierge desk. He saw her come in. He did not look at her the way he had looked at her on the Sunday morning. He looked at her the way a man whose senior had told him, "If she comes, looked at her. Her hands were quiet in her lap. The room smelled, faintly, of warm wood and old fire. "Miss Whitfield." "Mr. Carrick." "He is in his office." "He is the president of Donovan Hospitality Group." "He is. I have, over many years, watched him be reluctant to say so on dates." She almost laughed. She would not, in the same minute, allow herself to laugh. "May I go up?" "He told me 2 months ago that you might. The 12th floor. The brass key is in the elevator. Turn it once." She went up. The elevator opened onto a quiet corridor with a single door at the end. The door was open. Liam was inside the office, standing at a window with his palm flat on the sash. He turned when he heard her come in. He did not, at any point, try to apologize before she had said anything. He waited. He let her have the room. "You are the president of Donovan Hospitality Group," she said. "I am." "You did not say." "I did not." "Why?" "Because," he said after a long pause, "I have been the president of Donovan Hospitality Group since I was 25 years old, and the only thing in my life that has not been about that fact in 7 years has been the inside of a 1988 first edition and a Bartok lullaby on a cassette, and a corner table on a Friday at a restaurant where the owner calls me Liam and not Sir. I did not, when I started writing to you, want to lose that. I wrote in my second letter to ask you about a tin of biscuits, because the tin of biscuits is, in this building, the most honest thing on the 12th floor. I have walked past your building 4 times a week for 2 months. You have. I read a society blog this morning. I am sorry. I'm told there was a photograph. There was a photograph of the awning. Yes. I did not. Liam. She stopped. She pressed her thumbnail. She started again. I did not, when we met, ask you the right questions, because I did not, then, want to know the answers. I'm not angry. I am disoriented. The room is the wrong shape from this corner. He nodded. He took his palm off the sash. He came across the room. He stopped at a polite distance, the same polite distance he had stopped at her table 8 weeks ago. He did not, then, touch her. The wood of the desk was smooth under her palm. "What do you need from me?" he said. It was, of all the sentences he had said to her, the one she had not been expecting. What do you need from me? Not, what can I do? Not, I'm sorry. Not, let me explain. What do you need from me? "A week," she said. "A week?" "Yes. I need to walk around the city for a week with the new word in it." "All right." "You will write. Only if you write first." "That is fair." "I would like to know how the room is on the 7th day." "I will tell you." He inclined his head, the half-inch nod, again Henry's nod, and she walked out of the office. She went down in the elevator. She did not look at Henry on the way through the lobby. She walked back to the studio. Amelia, who had not, in the intervening 40 minutes, touched her coffee, looked at her over the top of her glasses. Cora set her bag on the table. Cora took off her coat. Cora sat down across from Amelia and said, "He is the president of Donovan Hospitality Group, and he did not say because he was trying, with me, not to be it. I have asked for a week." "The case for the week," Amelia said slowly, "is that you have, for 6 months, been a person who had a Tuesday email taken from you, And the week will allow you to find out whether the room is wrong because the man lied, or wrong because the room was never the right shape, and you had been walking around in it pretending. The case against the week is that the man you asked it of has, for 2 months, been writing to you about a tin of biscuits, which is, on balance, the way a person who is trying not to ask anything from you writes. I know. Take the week. Tell me on Friday. Cora walked the city for a week. She walked the long way home from the studio, by the Common, on 3 of the 7 evenings. She walked, on a Wednesday morning, all the way down to Fort Point, and looked at a building she had translated a section of a guidebook about in 2019, and tried to remember what it had felt like to know a building only as a fact. She thought about the brass plate. She thought about the cassette in the office, and Henry at the threshold, and the small, careful way Liam had said the tin of biscuits is the most honest thing on the 12th floor. She thought about Marcus, briefly. Marcus on a Tuesday in November, in a suit she had picked out for him 3 years ago, in a London he had moved to without her, signing off an email, "Let's circle back when I'm back in town," which had not, in the event, ever happened. She thought about the difference between a man who used the phrase, "circle back," and a man who used the phrase, "What do you need from me?" On Friday, she wrote to him. She wrote 1 sentence on a postcard from the small bookshop on Charles Street. "The room is the right shape from this corner. Please write. C." His reply came on Tuesday, the long way, by post. "Friday at the studio at 6, if Amelia will let me. I will bring nothing this time. L." He came on Friday at 6. He brought, in fact, nothing. No book, no parcel, no note for the desk. Outside, the warm Boston dusk pressed at the windows. Amelia, who had decided, somewhere between the postcard and the Tuesday letter, that she had been quite enough of an editor for 1 summer, had a dinner with a college friend in Cambridge and a coat over her arm by 5:45. She crossed Liam at the door at the top of the stairs. She looked at him as she had looked at him the first time, but the look was softer. The window held a quiet square of bright afternoon. "The case for me trusting you, Mr. Donovan, is that you have not in 2 months made it about yourself," she said. "And the case against me trusting you is that you are now in a small front room with a woman who is mine. Do not, please, make me revise my position." Liam, who had clearly never been spoken to in quite that order of sentences before, inclined his head. Outside, the warm Boston dusk pressed at the windows. "I will try not to." Amelia put on her coat. She went down the stairs with the bag of receipts she had been carrying since lunchtime, and the small bell at the bottom rang as she closed the street door, and the studio was quiet. Cora was at the long table. She had not, that day, opened the Kalmar manuscript. She had, instead, made a small list in her notebook of all the questions she had not yet asked him. He sat down opposite her at the table. He set his palm flat on the wood. He did not, this time, do the small, awkward thigh flatten when he took it off. He simply rested it there and waited. "I have a list," she said. "Read it." She read it. What does "I look after it" mean? What did the 18 months of reading upside down as a teenager mean? What is in the drawer of the desk in your office? Why did Henry use the phrase, "If she comes, she comes"? Why is your mother in Boston? Why does the brass plate beside the door read Donovan Lansing and not Donovan? Who is the woman the society blog called a source close to the board? What does the company want from you that you do not want to give it? He listened. He did not, while she was reading, look away from her face. He did not, while she was reading, set his hand on top of hers, which was the smallest restraint of all, and which she noticed. "In order," he said, "and as truthfully as I can." He spread his palm flat on the table between them, the way a man steadies a thing he is afraid will move. A copper light from the lamp caught the iron of the grate. "I look after it," is what my father said about the hotel when he was in it. I said it in a corridor because, for 30 seconds, I wanted to be a man who had inherited a sentence and not a corporation. She did not interrupt. She kept her thumbnail at the edge of her index finger and waited. The silk of her sleeve brushed the cold edge of the desk. The 18 months of reading upside down was the summer and autumn and winter and spring after I lost my father. I was 19. He had gone, in fact, in this hotel, in the lobby, a Wednesday in November, of a heart attack he had been told about and had ignored. I came home from college, and I sat across from a great many lawyers and accountants at a long table, not entirely unlike this one, for 18 months, while I learned the company by reading the paper they were reading, The Wrong Way Up. I am a poor lawyer and a slightly better hotelier. The kettle sound from the hall had stopped. Somewhere in the suite a window was open, and the harbour was a low, patient noise. The leather strap of the satchel creaked as she set it down. The drawer of the desk in my office contains a pocket watch my father wore on his last day, which my mother gave to Henry, who gave it back to me on the morning of my 25th birthday, and has, since then, sat in the drawer because I have not been able to wear it, and have not been able to put it anywhere else. He paused on that one, and the pause was the longest of the answers. She felt the weight of it without lifting her eyes. She brushed a soft fingertip across the spine of the book. Henry uses the phrase, "If she comes, because Henry has, for 28 years, refused to say a sentence that contains a promise he cannot keep. My mother is in Boston because my mother is the chair of the board, and we are, this summer, in the middle of a financing decision the board would like me to make in a particular direction, and I would rather not." She breathed in and breathed out, and did not move. The brass plate reads Donovan Lansing, because the building was named for the architect by my grandfather in 1962, and to take the name off the door would have been a small unkindness to a man no longer here to be hurt by it. The source close to the board is, I will not, in this room, name. She is a person who has worked for the company longer than my mother has chaired it, and she has been, in this matter, on my side. He let the last question wait a moment, as if he were checking the truthfulness of it once more before he spoke. A copper light from the lamp caught the iron of the grate. "The thing the company wants from me that I do not want to give it is a marriage that the board believes would secure a credit line we will need next year. I am not going to do that. I have told them I am not going to do that. They have not, yet, accepted it." She listened. She had pressed her thumbnail through 3 of the sentences. She did not press it through the last one. "What is the woman's name?" she said. "The woman they would like me to marry?" "Yes." "Vivian Hale. I've known her since I was 12. She is, in many ways, a kind person. She does not, I think, particularly want this either, but her family has been very effective at making it sound like a thing she has already agreed to." "You do not love her?" "I do not." "You have never?" "I have not." "Has she—" "No. We have, at most, shared a glass of champagne at the same table twice in the past 2 years. Her family has been more enthusiastic than she has." "All right." Cora pressed her thumbnail. She set her notebook down. She looked across the table at him. "Then the room is the right shape from this corner. I would like, however, to know about the pocket watch on a future occasion." "On a future occasion, yes." He set his palm flat on the wood, halfway across the table. Not over hers, not toward hers, in the middle, where she could meet it if she chose. She met it. She put her hand on top of his. They stayed in the studio until the small bell from the street door rang twice, Amelia returning, with a bag of receipts and an apology about the train, and Liam stood up and inclined his head, and went out into the warm June evening, and Cora and Amelia closed the studio together at 10:15, and walked, in the long, slow Friday way, across the common. The next week, Adam Kalmar came to Boston. He came on a Tuesday afternoon, on the small commercial schedule he kept for himself. 2 readings, 2 dinners, 1 private lunch. And he arrived at Logan in a coat that was too heavy for June, with a small leather suitcase that he had been carrying since 1994. Cora had been his hostess on these trips 4 times in the last 6 years. She knew the order of operations. She knew that, on arrival, he would want a single coffee in a small place. She knew that, after the coffee, he would want to be left alone in his hotel room for 3 hours. She knew that on the second day, after the reading, he would want a long dinner at a long table with no more than 6 people, and that on the third day, he would want to walk somewhere by water. She had booked him into a small hotel on Beacon Hill that she had used for him before, because Adam did not, on principle, stay in large hotels. Outside, the wind moved in the iron railings. The reading was at the Athenaeum on Beacon Street, on the Wednesday evening, in the second-floor reading room with the long windows. 40 people came. Adam read in Hungarian. Cora read the English. Liam came. She had asked him to, on a Tuesday note, and he had said, "I will come and sit at the back and not embarrass you." And he had come and sat at the back and not embarrassed her. He did not, at the small reception in the front room, push forward. He stood by the window with a glass of water and waited. Adam, who had spent the entire reading not looking at Liam, looked at him for the first time in the small, clear way he looked at people he had decided to look at. He handed his own water glass to a librarian with an apology and crossed the room. The velvet on the chair arm was warm where her palm had been. "You are Liam Donovan," Adam said in his careful English. "I am. Cora told me, in the letter, in April." "In April?" "Yes, she wrote, 'The man at the wedding asked me to dance and I said no, and he sat down and listened to the second slow song and did not ask my name, and I have not been able to decide whether to write about it. I told her she should write about it. She did not. She has been busy with my book. I have been very glad for the book." Adam looked at him steadily. He had, in his face, the small, economical attention of a man who had spent 50 years deciding what was true. Her shoulder eased, a fraction, against the back of the chair. Her fingers brushed the cold brass at the edge of the lamp. "I will tell you a thing," Adam said. "This woman," he gestured with 2 fingers at Cora across the room, who was, at that moment, listening to a librarian explain a 1907 first edition, "is the reason the work is alive in English. The English-speaking world does not, as a rule, deserve the apartments of Hungarian poets. She has watered the plants for 16 years. She has not, in 16 years, moved the furniture. She has, on 3 or 4 occasions, moved a chair. The chair was, each time, better. I am glad to hear it. I will tell you a second thing. The man who comes across a floor to a woman who is sitting out 2 slow songs and does not ask her name and does not lie to her about the building, that man is a person I will trust until he gives me a reason not to. I am, frankly, easy to give a reason to. Do not give me one. I will try not to. Try harder than that. I will try harder than that." Adam nodded once. He turned away. He picked up his glass of water from the librarian. He went back across the room to a chair he had decided, on arrival, to sit in. He did not, for the rest of the reception, look at Liam again. But he did, twice, look at Cora. Once across the top of a sentence she was explaining to a graduate student, and once when she laughed, with the small, soft expression of a man who had been an honest plant waterer's reliable benefactor for 16 years, and was beginning to permit himself, at 68, the kindness of approving of her life. The room was warm and bright with afternoon. In the cab home, Cora said, "What did he say to you?" "He said the work was alive in English because of you, and he asked me not to make him sorry he had decided to trust me." He is, for the record, easier to give a reason to than he claims. I noticed. She set her hand on his on the seat between them. She did not press her thumbnail. She did not need to. That weekend they walked, in the long, slow rhythm of a Saturday in the city, from the studio to the common to the lobby of the hotel, because she had decided, on the Tuesday, that she would, by the weekend, be able to walk into the building with the new word in it without flinching. And she sat with him for an hour at the small table in the lobby cafe, where the pianist played something small, and Henry brought them a pot of strong tea without asking. The Bartok lullaby was not on the pianist's set list. She did not ask for it. The brass at the door handle was cool under her fingers. The silver light of the morning held still on the wall. On Sunday morning, she stayed at the hotel. She had not, until then, stayed. She did not, by either of their unspoken rules, stay in his apartment. There was no apartment in any case. He kept a suite on the 11th floor that he used 3 or 4 nights a week. And the suite was, of all the rooms in the building, the one most obviously not a home. But on the Sunday after the Athenaeum, after a long Saturday at the Common and a small dinner with Amelia, she had said to him at his door, "I do not want, today, to walk back across the Common." And he had said, "All right." He had given her his suite. He had taken the small spare room down the corridor. She had slept in a bed that smelled of nothing in particular, the way hotel sheets smelled, and had woken on the Sunday at 7, with the Boston light landing on a curtain she did not know. She brushed her fingers across the smooth wood of the sill. He came to the door of the suite at 8:30 with a coffee tray. He had on a dark sweater. He had his hair pushed back, the way men pushed their hair back when they had not yet looked at a mirror. He set the tray on the long table by the window. He set a small porcelain pot of jam on the corner of the tray, with a kind of self-conscious care. "I have," he said, "a thing to confess. The jam on this tray is the brand you refused to recognize at the Italian restaurant in May." She looked at it. The label was the small, dark green label of a brand she had told him, very firmly in May, was a thing she did not believe in, on the principle that any jam that could be found at every airport in Europe had stopped being jam and had become a marketing strategy. She had said it with great seriousness over a piece of bread. He had laughed. She had not, until now, realized that he had remembered. A soft creak from the leather chair. "I do not eat that jam," she said. "I know. You have placed it on the tray." "I have." "As a joke?" "As a joke. My first." "Your first jam-based joke?" "My first joke of any kind. I am hoping, in this, to receive lenient marks for the effort." She laughed. She laughed properly, with her shoulders, and she watched him watch her laugh, and she thought, he has been waiting 9 weeks to make a joke, and he has done it with a small jar. He sat down opposite her at the long table. He poured the coffee. He pushed the jar toward her. She pushed it back. Her hands were quiet in her lap. "Tell me a thing about the watch," she said. He looked at her. He hesitated. He set his hand around his cup. "I will, on a future occasion." "On this occasion?" "On this occasion." He took a breath. He looked out at the curtain. "My father came into the lobby on a Wednesday in November at 4:30. He had been told by a cardiologist 3 weeks before that he was to avoid stairs and stress and the long days he had been keeping for 30 years. He had not, of course, avoided any of them. He had been told, that morning, that a financing meeting he had been preparing for had gone badly. She did not move. She kept her thumbnail at her fingertip, and the room kept its own slow weight around them. Somewhere down the hall, the elevator hummed and stopped. He came into the lobby. He sat down on the second of the velvet chairs near the fireplace. He told Henry, who was at the front desk, that he was a little tired. He was gone by 4:45, on the chair, with his coffee on the small table beside him. He paused. He set his palm on the corner of the table, the way he set it on the brass plate the day she had pressed her thumb to it. His hand rested, flat, on the smooth wood. Henry kept his head. Henry called for an ambulance and for me, in that order, and the ambulance arrived in 7 minutes, and I arrived in 3 hours, from college. By the time I came in, my father had already been moved. Henry, who had unbuttoned his coat to make him comfortable, had taken the watch off his wrist, because he did not want the medics to be the ones who took it off. A small Siemens, the kind that did not ask to be filled. He gave the watch to my mother. My mother gave it to me on the morning of my 25th birthday, when she also gave me the chair of the company. I have not, since, been able to wear it. I have not, since, been able to put it anywhere else. Henry, who is not a sentimental man, told me on the day I put it in the drawer that the drawer is, on balance, not a bad place for it. He said the drawer is in the room where the work happens, and the work is the watch. She did not, then, speak. She set her coffee down. She crossed to him at the table. She did not, then, sit on his lap, or take his hand, or do the small things film couples did in the small versions of these moments. She stood beside him, with her hand on the back of his shoulder, lightly, with the warm iron weight of a person who knew, from 16 years of standing beside a poet who did not want to be touched while he was thinking, when to be a flat palm on a shoulder. "All right," she said, very softly. "All right." He did not, for a long minute, move. He set his palm flat on the table. He breathed out. He turned in the chair and put his forehead briefly against her ribs. She felt the sharp, soft edge of the page against her thumb. "Thank you," he said. "Yes," she said. She kept her hand on his shoulder. Outside, the Boston light moved on the curtain. The coffee cooled on the tray. The small jar of jam she did not eat sat between two saucers, very faintly, like a small green note on a music stand, and she thought, against the warmth of his head against her ribs, that there were going to be, between them, a great many more small jars she had not seen yet, and she would know them when they arrived. The first one arrived sooner than she had expected. She had been at the studio on the Tuesday after the Sunday morning. She had been in the back room. She had heard the bell ring at the foot of the stair, and she had not, that day, expected anyone. And she had come into the front room to find that Amelia had let in a tall woman in a pale suit with grey hair the colour of a winter beech, who was standing very straight at the long table with her gloves in one hand. "Miss Whitfield," the woman said. "Yes," Cora said, carefully, the syllable still her father's. "I am Cordelia Donovan. I am Liam's mother." A small silence, and Cora, who had been seeing the brass plate by the door of the hotel as a feature of the room for 2 months, felt the room tilt. Cordelia Donovan did not, when she said her name, soften her face. She had, in her face, the kind of unsoftened intelligence one only earned by having survived a worse year than one had told anyone about. She had on her wedding ring the small, private gesture of a thumb that had clearly, in the 8 or 9 seconds before Cora had come into the room, been moving along the edge of the band. Outside, a soft wind moved in the linden trees. "May I help you?" Cora said. "Frankly," Cordelia said, "I do not believe so. I came to deliver an opinion." "An opinion?" "Yes. I will not take a chair. I will not take a cup of tea. I have come, on a Tuesday morning, to the office of the woman my son has been ignoring his board for, to say, in person, that I think this is a mistake. He is a man with—" Cordelia paused. She set her gloves down on the table and lifted them again, as though the table had not been a sufficiently appropriate surface. "He is a man with a great deal of responsibility, and very little flexibility about it. And he is making a decision, in this summer, that will cost the company a credit line we will need by November. I have told him this. He has not listened. He has, in fact, become, in conversations with me, increasingly unwilling to listen. I have come to ask you, frankly, to stop encouraging him. Cora kept her hands on the table. She did not press her thumbnail. I have not encouraged him, Mrs. Donovan. You have not had to. He is encouraged by the existence of an alternative. You are saying I am an alternative. I am saying you are the inside of a sentence he has been writing in his head for 8 weeks, and the company is paying for the inside of the sentence. It was, in its way, a very precise thing to say, and Cora, who had spent 16 years deciding what was inside of a sentence, found it impressive, in the dry, separated way she found impressive a small line in a Kalmar poem about a windowsill. She did not, however, find it persuasive. She set her hand on the edge of the table. She looked at Cordelia. Mrs. Donovan, she said very evenly, I will tell you a thing. I did not, when I met your son, know who his family was. I did not, for 2 months, know what his work was. I did not, when I found out, send a letter that he might use against the board. I did not, when I sat in his office, ask him to do anything other than what he had already decided to do. He has, by his own statement, made his decision before I made mine. He chose this before I did. If you would like to tell him that he has been wrong about you, I will not stand in your way. I do not, however, intend to leave the room because you have asked me to. Cordelia held her eye. She did not, for a long moment, speak. She had in her face the small adjustment a person made when a sentence they had prepared on the train was being returned to them, intact, by a stranger. The window held a quiet square of bright afternoon. You are not what I expected, she said. I am, in fact, very ordinary, Mrs. Donovan. I translate Hungarian poetry. I lost my fiancé in November. My sister got married 6 weeks ago at your son's hotel. I have not asked for any of this. I see. If you will allow me, I am sorry about your husband. Cordelia, who had not for the entire conversation moved her hand off the gloves, set the gloves down on the table. She did not then speak. She did not then sit. She picked up the gloves again. She inclined her head, not the half-inch Henry and Liam nod, but a smaller and older inclination. The inclination of a woman who had been raised to thank a person for a kindness, even when the kindness had been delivered by a person she had come to dislike on principle. Thank you, she said. I will think about what you have said. She went out. Amelia, who had been in the back room the entire conversation, with the door cracked half an inch, came out as soon as the small bell at the bottom of the stair had rung. The room smelled of paper and a soft wood polish. Cora. I know. You spoke very evenly. I know. It was the most evenly I have ever heard you speak in 3 years. I noticed. The case for telling Liam about this immediately is that I am not going to tell Liam about this immediately. All right. I'm going to think about it for 1 day. All right. Cora went home. She did not, that night, sleep. She wrote 2 lines of Kalmar in pencil at the kitchen table, and crossed them out, and rewrote them in pencil, and crossed them out again. And she pressed her thumbnail until she had a small white half-moon. At 1 in the morning, when she had decided to try, finally, to sleep, she opened her phone for the first time in 11 hours. And there was, on her screen, a notification from the same small society blog Amelia kept open. The headline was, Hale family hosts intimate dinner. Liam Donovan expected. Sources say Vivian Hale is the board's preferred match. She read the headline twice. She did not read the piece. She turned her phone face down on the kitchen table. She pressed her thumbnail to her fingertip. It was a soft press. She did not, in fact, sleep. In the morning, she sent 1 message. Liam, please do not call this weekend. I need a few days. I will write. C. He did not reply. He did not call. By Saturday afternoon she had not properly eaten. She had not properly slept. She sat on her sofa in her flat with the small Bartok cassette he had let her have from Henry's box of tapes on her lap, and did not, for 2 hours, put it into the small kitchen radio she had been carrying around with her for years. Her pulse was a small, bright thing at her throat. She thought in flat, declarative sentences. Maybe he was always going to do the dutiful thing. Maybe he learned to ask a question with his palm flat on a banister, and that is the whole of what he has. Maybe Cordelia is right, and the inside of his sentence is the only thing he can afford to give me. And the inside of a sentence is not a life. Maybe I am, after all, the woman who is set down when the music stops. And I have, for 9 weeks, been hearing the music and not the room. She pressed her thumbnail until she could not feel the print. She put the cassette back into its small plastic case. She lay on the sofa with her face toward the window. The light moved across the wall, and the light kept moving, the way light kept moving in a flat in Beacon Hill on a Saturday afternoon in June. And she did not, until Sunday at 1 in the morning, get up from the sofa. A small dust of sun lay on the table. She got up because the phone, the only phone she had not silenced, rang. It was the studio phone. It was, at 1 in the morning, Henry Carrick. She brushed her fingers across the smooth wood of the sill. Miss Woodfield. Mr. Carrick. I am sorry to telephone you at this hour. I have, on my desk, a tin of biscuits Mr. Donovan's mother sent him 3 months ago. He has, this evening, opened it. I told him I would tell you. He said I was not, in any circumstances, to tell you. I am, of course, telling you. He has, however, asked me not to tell you a second thing, which I will not tell you, except in this form. There is a board meeting on Tuesday morning at 9. He has spent today writing a letter for it. I have read the letter. It is, in my professional opinion, the kind of letter that costs the company a credit line. I thought you might wish to know. Thank you, Mr. Carrick. Good night, Miss Woodfield. Good night. She put the phone down. She stood at the kitchen counter in the small kitchen of the flat in Beacon Hill. The light was a kitchen light. The clock was a kitchen clock. The lullaby was not playing. She pressed her thumbnail into her finger. She did not, then, cry, because she had been a person who did not cry for 6 months and had not yet relearned the trick. But she made a small noise, like a laugh that was not a laugh, and she said aloud to nobody, "All right." She set the cassette down on the counter. She went back to bed. She slept for the first time in 2 days. His breath was even. His hands were warm and still. The board meeting at 9 on Tuesday took, by Amelia's late account from her browser tab gossip blog, 3 hours and 26 minutes. By 12:45, the Small Society blog had a post up. By 1:15, the Boston Globe business section had picked it up. By 2, the company had issued a single-sentence statement that the Globe ran in full. Donovan Hospitality Group has formally declined an exclusivity offer from Hale Capital regarding the planned 2026 credit facility and will be pursuing alternative financing arrangements. The post on the Society blog was less measured. Hotelier refuses strategic match. Family source calls move reckless. Board chair Cordelia Donovan was not available for comment. Amelia read the lines to Cora across the long table at the studio at 1:20. The room smelled of paper and a soft wood polish. Cora sat very still. She put her hand around her coffee. She did not press her thumbnail. "He did it," Amelia said. "He did. He did not call you. He did not. Are you going to go? I am going to walk there now." "All right." Cora put on her coat. She took the cassette from the small velvet pouch in her bag, the way one took a key from a pocket. She walked, in the warm Tuesday afternoon, the 4 blocks to Newbury. She did not, this time, stand on the opposite pavement. She crossed at the corner. She went up the small marble step. She nodded to the doorman. She crossed the lobby. Henry was not, on this occasion, behind the concierge desk. The desk was being managed by a young woman in the same dark blazer Henry wore. Henry, Cora found, was at the lobby grand. He was talking to the pianist. He had, on the music stand, a single sheet of paper. "Mr. Carrick?" "Miss Whitfield." "Is this?" "It is. I asked him for it at the back of the staff break room an hour ago. He found it in the cabinet of music we keep for weddings. He has agreed to play it once for the lobby in 15 minutes. It will be considered, by all parties, a routine afternoon piece. Mr. Donovan is, at the moment, in his office. He has been informed that you are in the building. He has been told, also, that I have asked the pianist a favor. He has not been told the favor." "Mr. Carrick?" "Miss Whitfield." "You—" "It is a small thing to do for a man one has worked for since he was 19 years old." Henry, who did not, as a rule, speculate, did not, on this occasion, speculate. He inclined his head. "If you will come and sit by the small table with the lamp, I will let him know when you are ready." She sat at the small table with the lamp. The lobby moved around her in the small, competent rhythm of a hotel doing its work. 2 guests checked in at the desk. A runner carried a tray to a meeting room. A doorman opened the door for an older couple who had been to dinner at the lobby restaurant. The pianist, on his bench, fingered the sheet music in his left hand. Henry crossed the marble floor to the lobby cafe and spoke a sentence to the maitre d'. The maitre d' nodded. Henry walked, quietly, back across the lobby and through a door behind the concierge desk. Outside, the wind moved in the iron railings. At 15 minutes past 2, exactly, the pianist began the lullaby. It was the small Bartók. It was the piece her father had played at every wedding he had ever been to. It was the piece the band had played at her sister's wedding 2 months and 3 weeks ago. It was the piece that had, in the cassette in her bag, been played by a man at the New England Conservatory in 1973. The pianist on the lobby grand did not play it as her father had played it, and did not play it as the man on the cassette had played it. He played it as he himself played it, in a small lobby on a Tuesday afternoon in June, with a small dignity and very little extra. Cora kept her hands flat on the small table. She listened. The lullaby was 3 minutes and 20 seconds long. By the second bar, Liam was in the lobby. Her shoulder eased, a fraction, against the back of the chair. He had come out of the door behind the concierge desk. He had not, when he came out, looked at Henry. He had not, when he had crossed half the lobby, taken his hands out of the pockets of the dark coat he had put on for the meeting. He came to the small table with the lamp. He stopped at the polite distance. "May I sit?" he said. "Yes." He sat. He did not, then, speak. He listened to the rest of the lullaby with her. He kept his hands in his coat pockets. He looked at her face, twice, and then at the floor, and then at the pianist, and then at her hand on the small table. He did not, for the length of the piece, take his hands out of his pockets. The room was warm and bright with afternoon. The lullaby ended. The lobby returned to its small, competent quiet. The pianist turned the page. The maitre d' from the lobby cafe, who had clearly been told by Henry to give them the small table for the rest of the afternoon, sent a junior runner with a small pot of tea and 2 cups, and a small plate of plain biscuits, and the runner set the tray on the small table without a word and left. The dark velvet of the curtain held still in the warm air. "You read the Globe," Liam said. "I did." "I have not in the last 3 days written to you. I asked you not to. You did. I read it because I had not slept, because your mother came to the studio on Tuesday." "My mother came to the studio?" "On Tuesday. She made an argument." "Will you tell me the argument?" "On a future occasion." "On a future occasion." "On this occasion, I will tell you that the argument was not, in fact, persuasive. She concluded by saying, "I will think about what you have said." I do not know whether she has thought about it. I suspect she has not. "She has," he said, after a small pause. "I will, on this occasion, tell you why. She came to my office on Saturday afternoon. She had not, in 12 years, set foot on the 12th floor. She came in. She set a small envelope on the desk. She said, 'I'm going to step away from the board for 3 months. I have, in the past week, become aware that I've not been a particularly reasonable mother for some time. I do not, this minute, know what I would like to do about that. I will write to you, however, in the autumn.' She went out. The envelope contained a written notice of leave. I have not, since Saturday, spoken to her. All right. She did not, at any point in the conversation, ask me what I would like to do. That was very like her. It was. It was also, I think, the first thing she has ever done that suggested she was capable of not asking. The tea on the small table cooled. "I told the board this morning," he said, "that I will not marry for the company. I told them that I will not marry for any reason that is not the one reason a person ought to marry. I told them that we will, by November, have a different credit facility. And I told them, in addition, that the search for a different facility will begin at the close of the meeting. I have, since the meeting, had 3 of them in my office. 2 were polite. 1 was not. I did not, in the meeting, name you. I have not, anywhere, named you. The Society blog has its sources, and they are, of necessity, in the building. But the building is large enough to be inscrutable. I noticed. I did not, this morning, do this for you." She looked at him. "I noticed that also. I did it because I have, for 7 years, been refusing to do the thing my father would have done, and the refusing has been, in itself, a form of the thing. I have wanted, for a long time, to do a thing in my own voice, and I have not, until this morning, had the small, specific arrangement of light and pressure in the room that allowed it. The arrangement of light and pressure was, in part, you. It was not, by any margin, only you. It was, in addition, the cassette and the lobby, and a sentence Henry said to me in November about the watch, and a tin of biscuits I should have opened in March. I would like, with you, however, to have the rest of the conversation about what I have, in the last 9 weeks, become capable of. All right? I have been told, by both Henry and the Globe business reporter, that the credit facility piece will continue to be a story until October. I have been told, by Amelia, that I am to take you, this Friday, to a small bookshop on Charles Street, and not, frankly, care what the Globe business reporter says. That is very like Amelia. It is. Will you, this Friday, take me to the small bookshop on Charles Street? Yes. Cora? Yes. He set his hand on the small table between them, palm flat, halfway across. She set hers on top of his. The maitre d' from the lobby cafe, who had been politely not watching, returned to his desk. The pianist began a different piece, a piece neither of them recognized, which was the right piece, because it was no one's. They sat at the small table by the lamp for a long time. The cassette stayed in Cora's bag. Henry, behind the concierge desk, attended to a guest with great competence. When she stood up to leave, Liam stood up with her. He did not, on the way to the door, put his arm around her shoulder. He did not, on the way, take her hand. He walked beside her, at the small, polite distance he had been walking beside her at for 9 weeks, with his coat over his arm. At the door he said, "I will come on Friday." She said, "I will be there." He said, "Cora." She turned at the marble step. He said, "Thank you for the lullaby. I asked Henry in the spring for it once, and he told me I had not yet earned it." He was right. He often is. She walked out into the warm afternoon. The lullaby followed her, In the small, private way, a piece of music followed a person who had been carrying it for 8 years, the 4 blocks back to the studio. 4 months later, on a cool, late September Saturday, the Donovan Lansing's mezzanine was set up for a small literary event. There were, on the long table by the windows, 60 copies of a slim book with a pale sage green cover. The cover read, in plain type, Adam Kalmar, The Spring is Rusting, translated from the Hungarian by Cora Whitfield. The pile was, by the time the room filled, 4 copies smaller. The light moved softly across the wood. Tessa was at the table with her husband Daniel, in a dark dress she had bought on the trip back from Maine, and she was, very gently, in charge. Margaret Whitfield was on the small couch by the window, with a glass of pale wine, watching the room the way a school librarian watched a small reading room, with the satisfaction of a person who had spent her professional life arranging the conditions under which a thing like this could happen. Amelia was at the door, in the role of host, taking coats and giving small recommendations from the pile. Adam Kalmar was not, on this occasion, present. He had written, in a careful English letter, that he would not, at 68, fly twice in one summer, but that he would, on the day of the event, light a candle on his kitchen table and read in Hungarian what Cora had read in English, and that they should consider this a synchronized reading. Cora had set, at the small lectern, a candle in a small glass. The fire in the small grate had burned to a soft, dark glow. Henry was, of course, at the door of the mezzanine. He was, of course, not in his blazer. He was in a dark suit, the kind of suit a senior staff member wore at the wedding of a daughter he had decided, after 30 years on the job, to attend out of uniform. He had been overruled by his employer on the question of whether to be in uniform. Liam was at the back of the room, by the window. He was in a dark suit. He had on a watch, not the watch in the drawer, a different watch, a plainer one. But the watch in the drawer had, on this particular morning, been moved, after a small private conversation in his office on the Friday evening, from the drawer to a small velvet pouch on his desk, with the agreement that it would be moved, on some quiet Saturday in November, to a small box at the foot of the bookshelves in Cora's flat, where it would stay, alongside her father's old wedding band watch, which had been in the same box for 8 years. Cordelia Donovan was, to the small surprise of everyone in the room, herself included, also in attendance. She had come in just before the reading, in a pale autumn coat with her gloves still on. She had crossed the room to Cora at the lectern, before Cora had stepped up to read. She had put one gloved hand briefly on Cora's wrist. She had taken from her bag a small cream envelope and set it on the lectern next to the candle. "Frankly," she had said, very quietly, "I owe you a sentence. I have written it. You may read it now or later. I will not, either way, be in the room." She had inclined her head, the same older, smaller inclination she had inclined in May at the studio. She had turned. She had gone before the reading. His breath was even. His hands were warm and still. Cora had opened the envelope at the small table by the window at the end of the reading, after the last book had been signed and the last small group of friends had said their goodbyes, and the mezzanine had emptied of all but Tessa and Daniel and Margaret and Amelia and Henry and Liam. The envelope was thick. The handwriting was a sloping, older hand. The note was 3 sentences. "Miss Whitfield, you were not what I expected, and I am sorry I told you the building was a sentence rather than a room. I have, in the last 4 months, been a less effective version of myself than I would like to have been. But in this letter, with my name on it, I will say I was wrong, and that I am glad my son has chosen what he has chosen, and that I will, between now and Christmas, become a less effective version of someone who was wrong. Cordelia Donovan." Cora read the second sentence aloud to Liam, who was at her shoulder. He stood very still. He did not, then, speak. He set his palm flat on the table, halfway between them. She set the letter back into its envelope. She set the envelope into her bag. She set her hand on top of his. Tessa, across the room with Daniel, gave her the small look a sister gave a sister, when a sister had decided, after 8 years, that the small look was again a thing she was allowed to give. Margaret stood up from the couch. She came across to the table. She set her hand against Cora's cheek, the same cool, dry hand she had set against Cora's cheek on the wedding night 5 months before. She said, "Your father would have been very pleased with the second translation of the third poem." Cora laughed. Margaret, who did not, as a rule, hover, did not hover. She kissed Cora once on the temple and went to find her coat. The mezzanine emptied. The Bartok was not on the pianist's set list that evening. The pianist had, in fact, gone home. The lobby was, by 10, quiet. Henry locked the small side door of the mezzanine and went down to his desk. Tessa and Daniel took Margaret in a cab to the station. Amelia, who had been carrying boxes for an hour, said her goodbye in the doorway and crossed the lobby with the air of a person who had been a professional editor at a literary magazine and now was, at last, off the clock. The bell at the small bookshop on Charles Street had, by 10:30, long since stopped ringing. The lobby of the Donovan Lansing was quiet. There were 2 lamps on. The Grand was uncovered. The maitre d' of the lobby cafe had gone home. Liam took Cora's coat from the small hook by the lectern. He did not put it on her. He laid it over the back of a chair. He held out his hand. He did not say anything. She took his hand. They went down the small staircase to the lobby. They stood, for a moment, on the marble floor, at the spot where she had stood with the velvet pouch in her bag in May. The Grand was open. The lamps were on. The doorman, in the small, careful way the doorman had been told to do, was, on this occasion, in another room. Cora hummed, very softly, the first 3 bars of the Bartok. Liam, who had not been told, in advance, that there was going to be no pianist, set his palm flat against the back of her shoulder. He did not, then, do anything else. He waited. She hummed the second 3 bars. He matched his weight to hers. She set her hand on his shoulder. They moved, in the small, careful way 2 people moved when they were dancing to a piece of music that had been carried, between them, for 9 weeks and 3 days, and a Wednesday in November 13 years before that, and a Saturday in April 8 years before that, across the marble floor. She did not, on this occasion, sit out. She danced the whole piece. He danced it with her. The 3rd time through, she stopped humming, and she set her cheek against his collarbone, and they stood for a long moment in the empty lobby, at the spot where the velvet chairs had been, and she said, very quietly, into the lapel of his coat, "Take me home, please." "Where is home today?" "Charles Street." "All right." He took her coat from the chair upstairs. He put it on her on the marble floor. He inclined his head to the doorman who had returned. He held the door. He walked her, in the cool September evening, the 4 blocks back to Charles Street, with his palm at the small of her back, at the polite distance he had been walking beside her at for 4 months. Her hands were quiet in her lap. She heard, very quietly, the hum of the iron radiator. At her door, she turned. She set her hand flat on the doorframe. "Liam?" "Yes." "Stay." "All right." She let them in. She closed the door. The street lamp through the window made a small pool of light on the kitchen floor. She set her bag on the table. She set the envelope on the table next to the cassette. She set the small velvet pouch with the watch on the table next to the envelope. The small kitchen light of the small flat in Beacon Hill made the table look, for a moment, like a small altar of objects 2 people had been carrying for a long time and had decided, finally, to set down. He set his palm flat on the table. She set hers on top of his. "Stay," she said again, softly. "I will."